Hi, Daryl Rhodes here with What Pond, your pond specialist. And today we're going to do a little interview and learn about aquatic invasive species. We have a special guest with us to help us learn more, and her name is Sarah Stallman. She has been in the she's an aquatic invasive species specialist with Sea Grant and doing outreach programs to help teach us how to clean our boats, keep the, all the plants and stuff that would accumulate on our boats or on our boots in that body of water before you go someplace else to spread it. So let's meet Sarah.
Hello.
And we'll get started. And I kind of gave it away, but you're aquatic invasive species specialist, and you've been in this for 8 years?
About 8 years.
8 years. So you've seen a lot, done a lot, and what's your daily base? What do you do?
Well, we spend a lot of time at Pennsylvania Sea Grant on education and outreach for aquatic invasive species. Prevention is your #1 line of defense. Once you get past that prevention stage, it gets a little bit more difficult. You spend a lot more time, money, and resources on control and trying to eradicate, which oftentimes is difficult or impossible. So we spend a lot of time developing outreach materials, talking to stakeholders, working with the public, working with recreational water users, and showing them some simple steps that they can take to prevent spreading aquatic invasive species, whether it's just cleaning off their boats and equipment, making sure that they know how to identify things and report things if they come across something that's unusual. So all those things can help in ensuring that we catch things early and have a chance to do something about it before they spread and become established.
What if somebody's cleaning off their boat or their equipment and they find something? Whether it be a plant or fish or...
Well, the first thing that you want to do is if you're cleaning off your boat and you find something, you want to remove it. You don't want to take it someplace else. You want to make sure that you take it, even if you think it could be native, just remove anything that you see. If you find something that you think could be invasive, you can always contact either Pennsylvania Sea Grant or the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission and actually report what you find if you are thinking that you found an invasive species. We have a Pennsylvania field guide to aquatic invasive species that actually tells you the locations of a lot of these species. So you could use a resource like this to find out what you're finding. It'll help you identify it, and also if it's present in your county. So if it's something that's pretty widespread in your county, you don't necessarily have to report it, but if you feel like it's new to the area or it's something you haven't seen before, it's always a good idea to report it and do that quickly so that they can take action to prevent spreading it.
So we're talking aquatic invasive species, and I know there's probably going to be thousands of invasives, but what are some of the types of invasives? I know everybody's first thought is weeds, so there's other invasive species.
Yeah, so pretty much anything that there's some criteria for the term invasive, first of all. So an invasive species is something that came from someplace else that's not supposed to be here, could have been transported by boats or some other human transport, intentional introductions, but it got here, it's not supposed to be here, and it also has to cause some type of harm for it to be considered invasive. Invasive species can cause ecological harm, they can cause economic harm, and they can cause harm to human or animal health. So those are the two things. So you can have a species that's considered exotic, so it's not supposed to be here, but it doesn't cause any harm, and we have those everywhere. I mean, cows, corn, they're not naturally growing, but they're beneficial to us, so while they're exotic, they're not invasive.
They're not taking over.
They're not taking over, they're not fast spreading. And then you can also have those native species that are fast spreaders, but they're native, so they're not considered invasive because they're supposed to be here. So that's kind of how you can, but invasive species can be anything that fits that criteria, from things you can't see like pathogens, diseases, algae, to things like fish, reptiles, amphibians, invertebrates, fish, plants, birds, mammals, anything, any taxa that falls into those categories of things that aren't supposed to be there and cause harm.
I think you answered my next question with the invasives and fast spreaders.
Yeah.
Like the pickerel, weed. It's a fast spreader. Some people think it's invasive, but it's not. It's a native plant. It just grows fast and spreads fast because of the seeds or roots. But something like Phragmites, that goes crazy. It can take over, can kill anything. Nothing native can grow once it takes over.
Right, and Phragmites is definitely an invasive species. Not supposed to be here. Causes lots of problems, as we all know. It takes over habitat. It doesn't provide good habitat for a lot of the native species that we have, and it's pretty much found everywhere. Now there is, I believe, a native form of Phragmites, and it's very difficult to tell because there's cross-breeding that occurs, but most of the time what you're seeing is that invasive, grow crazy kind of Phragmites.
Taking over your pond or the ditches and fields or any wet area like cattails would.
Yeah.
So locally, we're in Erie, Pennsylvania, Erie County, and what are some of the invasives that you found locally that's becoming a problem or that's just erupted?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit going on right now. Last fall, we actually found our very first rusty crayfish, which is an invasive species of crayfish. They're pretty heavily infesting the Susquehanna area, but they haven't been found this far west. This is the first time that they were found in Presque Isle Bay. So we've had rusty crayfish that were found in Presque Isle Bay. We've also found hydrilla, which is a very nasty invasive plant in Pymatuning. That's a very new infestation. Another one is water chestnut, which water chestnut is, a lot of people think of the Chinese takeout water chestnut. It's totally different.
So we're not going to be able to eat it?
No, you're not going to be able to eat it. It actually forms these very thick floating mats. It's kind of like a floating rosette, and you can actually hand pull it out of the water, but it'll completely blanket a lake. So it has a lot of impacts, and
it's not a rooted plant?
It is rooted. It has one very long stem that roots down, and then at the top it forms like a rosette of leaves, and it floats on the top. So it is rooted, and it actually has these seeds that are very spiky, and there's 4 big spines on them, and they're actually so spiky that if you stepped on them with a shoe, they could penetrate your shoe leather. Yeah, so they're not something good to have, but that was found in Warren County recently, earlier this year. And the issue there is it was in Akeley Swamp, which is actually connected to the Allegheny River, and we're worried about it starting to move down into the Allegheny River, so there's efforts there as well. Another one that was just recently found, maybe last week, was round gobies in Lake LaBeouf. And round gobies heavily infest Lake Erie in Presque Isle Bay. If you've ever gone fishing out there, most likely you've caught a goby. They're very aggressive. They're small, but very aggressive. They feed on the eggs of native fish. They kind of are bottom crawlers. They crawl along the rocks, and they haven't previously been found in inland lakes. They were found in gravel pits in Fairview County, Fairview Township, but this is the very first infestation of a lake that's connected to a very significant water body, which would be French Creek. So French Creek is very biologically diverse, a lot of different species of darter, a lot of different species of mussels.
High quality.
Very, very. So it's very unfortunate. So hopefully round gobies don't end up in French Creek, so hopefully we can do something about it since we caught it what we think is early. And most of the time these species get there because round gobies, sometimes they're so small and they resemble bait fish. So when people buy bait, they might not know or be able to identify what's in their bait buckets. So they'll be using them as bait. And if you're finished fishing, you still have leftover bait, you dump your bait into the water, you've just introduced what could potentially be an invasive species. So we always advise people to never ever dump your bait. If you're done fishing and you still have bait left over, dump it in the trash or dump it on the ground, because it causes more harm to let that bait loose if there could potentially be an invasive species in there than to dump a few minnows in the trash.
And speaking of dumping, people done with their aquariums, they have the neat little fish, they have the fancy little plants.
Yeah.
Dump it in the pond, and now your pond's covered in an invasive weed because the aquariums, you can get the fancy little plants, but they're actually an invasive species. And just don't dump your water garden plants or your aquarium plants into the pond.
Absolutely. That's another huge vector of introduction is aquariums. And, you know, I think a lot of people think that they're doing the right thing. You know, they don't want to kill their fish if they don't want it anymore. Or a turtle, you know, if it gets too big and I didn't expect it to get this big, you know, I'm going to release it and do the right thing. But they don't realize the consequences that can have. So we always advise people, if you have something, you can't take care of it anymore, you know, if it's a fish or a reptile like a turtle, you can call your pet retailer and see if they'll take it back. You can donate it to a school. You can trade, you know, with other people who have aquariums, but you never ever want to release it. If you have a plant and you don't want it anymore, put it in a bag and put it in the trash. Don't try to, you know, dump a plant out, because those things will grow like crazy and establish. So those are some key things.
Some of them are even fragmented, so if it dried up in your yard, the wind came, blew it, it could end up in somebody's pond and you know, start an infestation.
Yes.
You were mentioning the rusty crayfish. What's their invasive, you know, what damage are they going to do?
So rusty crayfish, those are actually from the Ohio River Basin, so they're not supposed to be in Pennsylvania, but they're actually native pretty close by, and they're heavily used as bait, and that's probably how they got released, with bait. And they get larger than native crayfish. They outcompete native crayfish. So a lot of species that feed on native crayfish as a main food source, they can't feed on rusties because they get too big. And then if they can feed on them, some kinds of bass, small and largemouth bass, might be able to feed on them. But something within the rusty crayfish, it doesn't provide the same nutrient content as native crayfish. So it really negatively affects the food chain. But even more important than that, they love tearing up plant beds. So for some reason, they just chew them up. So in areas of the Susquehanna, where there's tons of rusty crayfish, you're not going to see any plants. So plants are very important for fish habitat, breeding and spawning locations, areas for them to hide. So obviously we care very much about our sport fishery in Lake Erie in Presque Isle Bay. So we're really worried about them getting out of control, their densities getting really, really high, and then that's going to impact our fish populations as well. And in Susquehanna, we've done sampling out there, and it's so bad that, you know, it's like a layer of crayfish on top of a layer of crayfish, and they're just crawling all over each other. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. So, I mean, we've actually only found 2 or 3 of them in Presque Isle Bay so far. So hopefully we can keep that under control and not let it get as bad as it has.
Don't fall into the water.
Yeah.
The goby. We already went over those. You mentioned a turtle. Are there more than one species that are bad, or?
In Pennsylvania, there's the red-eared slider and the yellow-bellied slider. The red-eared slider is sold in pet stores pretty frequently. They actually put a ban on the size limit, and it's actually not because of the main invasive. It has to be under 4 inches in diameter, or over, 4 inches in diameter, because kids can put them in their mouths and get salmonella. But they're invasive. They get to be pretty big. I mean, they can have a shell size of 10 plus inches. And so people buy these really cute little turtles and they think they're adorable, and then they get big and they release them. And they're out competing a lot of the native species of turtle that we have out there, a lot of them which are endangered. I mean, they share the same spawning habitats, the same food sources, so essentially we're seeing some of our native species decline because of those 2 species of turtle.
That's not good.
No.
Okay, we're talking about the gobies in Lake LaBeouf, and Sarah has...
So I have 2 species here that look very, very similar. One of them is a round goby. The other is our native species, the mottled sculpin. And at first glance, they look very, very similar, but there is a key way to tell them apart. So if you look at the underside, at the pelvic fin, you can see that one of them is fused and it looks like a suction cup, and the other is split, has 2 pelvic fins. So this is the round goby. So if you remember the suction cup fin, that is the invasive, the bad guy, and the mottled sculpin has the split. Another way you can tell, but it's not always reliable, and I don't know if you can see on the camera, is there's a black spot on the dorsal fin of the round goby that's not typically present. It's actually there a little bit, but it's usually a real dark black color there on the round goby. Not the most reliable, colors not the most reliable, but definitely looking at that
for the fin. What are you doing to, I guess, how are you going to get rid of them?
Well, It's really hard to say. It's just going to depend on what the Fish and Boat Commission decides to do about it. There's a lot of different options, and there's a lot of things that you need to weigh and consider when you're determining what you're going to do as far as control goes. You want to look at, can the lake be drawn down? Is it connected to another water body where if you treated it with like a pesticide, would it kill other species? Would it get into... So there's a lot of things to consider, and at this point it's early in the game, so I think that they're making choices and discussing what kind of resources we have and what needs to happen to take care of that infestation. Currently they put signs up all around Lake LaBeouf that make people aware, hey, there's ground gobies here, don't move your bait around, you know, be careful, clean your gear, that type of stuff, to make sure that people are aware that there's a problem and they can take steps to prevent spreading them or reintroducing them to other places.
Are they supposed to pull them out maybe?
They don't tell you, because a lot of people when they catch gobies, what they do is they'll like throw them to the birds, the seagulls to get them. We don't like recommend doing that because there's so many of them that, you know, just letting that one die isn't really going to do anything. Now in Lake LaBeouf it might be a different story. If you find one, I might hold on to it and call the Fish and Boat Commission, because right now we're trying to figure out the extent of the infestation. So we're actually going out there and seining for them and trying to see, well, how many are we catching in these different locations. So if you catch one in Lake LaBeouf, it might be a good idea to contact and let them know where you found them, and then they'll come in and do their analysis with seines and shocking and whatever else they need to do to figure out.
Very good. Any other plant species you want to cover? It's not, I mean, there's so many different, I mean, the book is huge.
Yeah.
And we'll show you how to get this or get a copy of it or a download. But there's just all kinds of plants.
Yeah, the book focuses on purely aquatic plants in one section, and then it also has a section on facultative plants, which are plants that, that's going to be your Phragmites, plants that are on land but more marshy areas, can grow in wetland soil. So there's two different sections of plants there.
Pathogens.
Yeah, pathogens. The pathogens are kind of difficult because a lot of the symptoms, like in Lake Erie, we're worried about viral hemorrhagic septicemia. But a lot of the symptoms that you see of that disease is very characteristic of other diseases. So with that, I mean, we want to make people aware of it, but they actually have to be tested. So you're not going to be able to go out and identify that a fish has VHS.
Okay.
So that's typically one we don't necessarily spend as much time on because it requires sending the fish away, having it tested, getting it back, and it's a little bit more involved in that.
Along the lines of prevention, I know we're clean our boats, clean our boots before we go fishing in another pond, or so we're preventing from carrying it to another pond or another lake. Is there any other ways to prevent it?
So we kind of like to chant the clean, drain, dry. That's the message, and we try to, you know, it's catchy, people remember it, clean, drain, dry. So cleaning involves first using your eyes and doing a visual inspection like we talked about, looking for plants, mud, debris, anything that's stuck on motors, trailers, any part of the boat, fishing equipment, and actually physically removing it. Cleaning also means, because we talked about like diseases, things you can't see, and also zebra mussels is another big one that we've had here in Lake Erie, and their babies, the larvae, are actually microscopic and free-floating. So you won't see them, and they could potentially, you know, be on top of plants or whatever that gets tangled onto your boats. So we always recommend doing some kind of a wash, and that could be a pressure wash or very hot water. They recommend like 140 degrees or more. So like even going to like if you have a boat that can go through a car wash, that's a good thing to do. Draining is draining your bilges, live wells, bait buckets, anything that holds water at that location before you move someplace else, because again, that live well or that bait bucket could contain zebra mussel veligers, it could contain, you know, some of our smaller microscopic things you can't see, so draining that at the location where you got the water from before moving. And then drying, it's kind of clean or dry. If you can't clean, you don't have the option to clean, and you're not planning on going anywhere for a while, these are aquatic organisms, so if you wait at least 5 days, it'll kill, you know, what's on your boat or trailer. So
Okay.
you can clean or dry. A lot of people, they're like, well, I don't want to wait 5 days. You know, I'm going here, 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 and here. Well, then you'll want to take the time to clean your stuff before you. Yeah.
That's what we do. We go out different ponds, weed the pond, get rid of the massive amount of weeds so it doesn't die and decay. Come home, clean everything off, hose it down, and then we're ready for the next place to go to instead of dragging another plant to another pond that they don't want. So it's a lot of work, but it's kind of saving the environment, saving your fisheries.
It's going to benefit you in the long run because you're the one who enjoys that activity, and you know these things harm your favorite activities. So
then if you do introduce something invasive and it's going to require treatment, then it's more money out of your pocket to try and get it under control. So I guess prevention and catching it right away would be the best. You know, if there's something getting into your ponds, like, hey, I don't know what that weed is, get pictures of it, send it an email, get a hold of someone online, or try and find it online, see what it is. If you need help, shoot us an email, we'll figure out what it is and get a handle on it at an early stage.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the part, I mean, where most people can get involved is prevention. I mean, that's where we need your help. You know, you're the ones who are out there on the ground doing the activities, and you're the one who can really make a difference by taking some simple steps. I also wanted to mention a really great resource is the Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers campaign. You can go to the website protectyourwaters.net, and it has broken out all the different activities and prevention steps for each of those activities. So if you're a scuba diver, there's prevention steps for scuba divers, operators, for boaters, anglers, waterfowl hunters, water gardeners, all the different vectors that could potentially spread invasive species. If you're involved in those activities, you can go check out those very specific steps that you can do. For more information, protectyourwaters.net. If you find something that you're unsure of and you want to report it, there's an online sighting report form both on the Pennsylvania Sea Grant website. The report will go to myself and our Invasive Species Council coordinator, and we'll make sure that the report gets to the right spot. Or the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission also has an online reporting form where you can go in, type in the information, where you found it. The more detail you can provide, the better. If you have pictures, you can take pictures. You can upload the pictures right to the form. If you have a GPS and you can take coordinates, that's always helpful as well. But you can put all that information into the form, hit submit, and it'll get reported to the right person. And then from there, they can take it and figure out whether they're going to send someone to go check out the infestation, whether a rapid response needs to happen, or what needs to happen from there. So.
We talked earlier off camera about Phragmites, purple loosestrife is pretty prevalent in Erie County.
Yeah.
So finding an invasive species, if it's new into the area, how's somebody going to know that, all right, I have Phragmites up in our little pond? I'm not going to call that in because it's all along 97, it's down 90, it's everywhere.
That's again another good way to use this book, because it'll tell you where things are already found in Pennsylvania, broken out by county. So I mean, if you're seeing something like Phragmites everywhere, and you're looking at this book, and
we probably don't need to report it.
Yeah, it's all throughout Pennsylvania or Erie County or wherever you are. You probably don't need to report it. If you're worried about it, go ahead and report it. But these reports are coming in constantly, and there is someone to go through and say, oh, it's a Phragmites report in Erie County. We know it's there. We're not going to do anything about it. So I would say it's always better to report rather than not report. But if you have enough information that says, yeah, it's here, you don't have to report every stand of Phragmites that you see or every stand of purple loosestrife that you see. So.
And the book does show the United States as well.
Yeah. So we'll just open up to.
So we don't have to go completely just sticking with Pennsylvania.
So here's water chestnut, and this actually needs to be updated because there's been that new infestation in Warren County. But it shows the Pennsylvania map and locations where it was found in Pennsylvania, and then also the United States distribution. And we're actually working on an update for this. We're going to do it about every 2 years because that's the thing with these resources is these distribution information is changing every day. When you have a printed resource like this. So we're actually also working on developing a smartphone application, and so that will be able to be updated a lot quicker and easier and more frequently. So we're actually working with, hopefully, Penn State University to make that happen within the next year or two. So you'll be able to download the Field Guide app. You're out in the field, you can open up the app and you should be able to get to the information that you need. And we're also going to make it so that you can report the species right from the app too.
That ought to be able to give you your GPS too.
Exactly.
Nice.
One-stop shop.
Yeah. So, I guess we covered a lot of information, and we want to thank Sarah for coming out. We've been going back and forth, trying to get this put together. The rain held off, the sun came out, which is good. So just take care whenever you're moving from one pond or one lake or one stream to another, that you're not carrying something strange with you and hurting another body of water. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
And we'll do this again if we need to.
All right.
More stuff comes up or whatever.
All right.
But that was
Appreciate
great.
it.
Thanks.